Africa Rising narrative has been a topical discussion not only on the African continent, but also among so many development partners worldwide. And people are looking at the African continent, and there is just so much hope, yet there's still so many questions, and there are a lot of paradoxes. One of the things that is very peculiar about this whole discussion is, where are the women in the African Rising narrative? So we are back here to all of our listeners and all of our viewers. Welcome to this episode of Women Rising in Africa, as we look at scenarios, as we look at situations and those things that are prevailing on the African continent. What is it that is affecting the women from rising, and what is it that the women themselves are not realizing that's affecting them from rising? On this particular episode, I'm joined by a very special guest, and this is Dr. Pearl Kupe, all the way from Pretoria, South Africa. Dr. Pearl Kupe, thank you. Welcome to Women Rising in Africa.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Cynthia. And let me start off by saying you're doing an amazing job.
Thank you.
You know, I really respect what you're doing. There's sometimes a little bit of competition amongst women.
Absolutely.
And I'm glad you're not one of those who are looking to compete or try to be better than others, but you're looking for a platform that will allow African women and women of color to actually express themselves and for their gifts and talents to be showcased.
Absolutely. And indeed, I think that's one of the reasons why we have so many challenges where the women themselves are fighting against each other. Yeah. But again, welcome to Zimbabwe. This is not a foreign place to you. This is also home.
This is home. I was born here. I won't say how many years ago.
Never ask a woman her age.
No. I was born in, Pararinyatwa. It wasn't Pararinyatwa then. So maybe I've just revealed my age unconsciously. But it's good to be back in Zimbabwe, especially in this time, in this dispensation. I love Zimbabwe and I believe in Zimbabwe. And I know that in this season, talk about women in Africa rising. Zimbabwe is rising.
Yes.
And we're going to see great things still come out of Zimbabwe.
Absolutely. Now, you're coming on the backdrop of the Threshing Floor Prayer Ministries Conference.
Yes.
And they've got a theme there, from generation to generation. But before we go there, Dr. Pearl, many people know you for the many hats that you put on. Some know you for the powerful prophetic pastoral anointing and grace that's upon your life. And some know you for your strong legal expertise. And others know you for the international development consultancy work you've been doing. But I'm sure the women out there who have been looking up to you as a role model may want to hear really from you. They've read about you, they've read your books, but they want to hear, who is Dr. Pearl Kupe?
Wow. Well, I think I'm not very different from many women. One of the things you've mentioned is the many hats or the multi-skilled aspect. If we were going to go to the Bible, I would say God is actually the first one who spoke about our multi-talented ability.
Yes.
And every woman out there has that ability to multitask. I just think that I'm just maybe one of those women who has tried to really push hard and make sure, thank God to a role model of a mother.
Absolutely.
A role model of a mother. She is actually the first woman in Botswana to get a PhD.
We salute her, we salute her.
We want to celebrate our mothers.
Yes.
Well, we're talking about generation to generation. And every one of us out there has a mother who has toiled, who has strived and tried to make a better place for her children. And I had an excellent role model in my mother. 1966, when Botswana became independent, which is where she is originally from. She was called by the first founding president, Seretse Khama, to come and build the nation, help build the nation, because she was one of only 4 graduates during independence.
And he picked a woman.
He picked her as one of the nation builders. He said, Sarara, we have 4 graduates. You need to come home. And so I was left in Canada with my father, who was a Zimbabwean citizen.
Right.
And my father and I were left in Ottawa, Canada, and he would cook sadza for me. Not very well.
Once a Zimbabwean, you cannot separate a Zimbabwean from sadza.
No, not from sadza, yes. So
Yes.
on Sundays we had Kentucky, but he would cook sadza for me. But the multitasking ability humility is something that every woman out there has a grace. I think the challenge that we have is around prioritization. How do we prioritize what we do according to, you know, the right mandate? How do we prioritize it in such a way that our families do not suffer?
Yes.
How do we prioritize it in such a way that there's balance? All of those. And one of the things that we need to do as women is to link up together more so that we help one another. We don't struggle against each other, but we help one another. So that's a challenge that we have to look at and see how do we help each other to multitask better in a corporate manner and a corporate fashion.
Now, given that background, you're talking about the multitasking and you're talking about also having other women there to support you. Yeah. There are many people who look up to you, Dr. Pearl, and they feel you have arrived. They look at the many accolades, the many awards, the many platforms that you present and you managed to cut across so many religious sectors, so many frontiers, really. They feel you've arrived. When you look at yourself, what do you feel you've arrived in terms of your significant pursuits?
I feel I've just started. I'm glad they feel I've arrived. I feel like the journey has just started.
It has just started for you.
You know, there's a time of preparation.
Yes.
And, you know, even the Bible will always be my source of comparison. That's what motivates me. That's what inspires me. That's my point of reference. So, you know, even with Jesus himself, it was 30 years of preparation before he actually started what ended up being a 3-year of ministry.
Wow.
And we can look at any biblical figure out there, Moses, etc. They had a whole decades of preparation before they were actually released to fulfill their exact specific and special assignment. So I'm glad there are women out there who feel like I've arrived. I feel like I have just started. And right now I'm doing a lot of things that are international.
Yes.
And like you say, you know, it's looking at different perspectives, the legal aspect, but everything that you have, I don't believe that God throws anything away.
No.
All your experiences, all your work assignments, whatever you've done is all preparing you for that assignment which you are supposed to be specifically focused on. Right. That purpose that you have been mandated to fulfill on earth.
Absolutely. Now, we're talking here to Dr. Pearl Kupe, and she's just telling us about the power of preparation, the need for women to work together, and also she speaks so much about how her mother was her role model. So we're closing up and we're wrapping up this first segment, but we want to come back and we want to dig in a little bit more. We want to look at how mentoring can actually take place and how the women rising narrative in Africa can actually be amplified. So to all of our viewers, thank you for joining us. Please don't go back as you join us for the second segment of Women Rising in Africa. Welcome back to the second segment of Women Rising in Africa, where we are having a conversation on women's contribution, not only on the African continent, but within their families and how they bring substance to the conversation of the Rising Africa narrative. And with me, joining me is Dr. Pearl Kupe from South Africa. And she's been talking to us in the first segment about the role of her mother played in terms of being that role model. And she was sharing a little bit about her background and also some of the things that have affected women from being able to discover themselves and to be able to find their purpose. Now, many people, like I said in the first segment, they look at you and they feel you've arrived. And you said you've just started. Yeah. But I know in your journey, there's so many obstacles that you've had to face and hindrances in your journey. Many women, when they are faced with this, they freeze. They get into a state of paralysis. They don't know how to move on. Maybe you want to speak a little bit into that. How have you dealt with your own obstacles? What were the strategies you employed? Yeah,
I mean, it's correct to say that, women face obstacles. And I think the challenge that we must look at is not looking at the obstacle as something that will stop you, but to see how will that obstacle actually strengthen me. One of the things I've learned to do in my life is to receive and to connect to obstacles as a launching pad. As a launching pad. Obstacles, I think, are there to train you. Obstacles are there to equip you. Obstacles are there to provoke and activate something in you.
Absolutely.
So I've learned to see every obstacle as something that is there to build my character, is there to build my tenacity. You will not become that kind of person who will be that woman of strength without obstacles. And I think, you know, probably we'll be talking about a role model to many who the late Winnie Mandela, who has just passed away.
Yes.
And she became the woman of strength that she was because of obstacles. So I don't know, we'll talk about her later. But I just want to say this to every woman, that obstacles are not there to kill you, but obstacles are there to actually strengthen you. And I also want to say this. I was saying this at a recent conference hosted by the King of Morocco. And I said that if there's a mountain there, one of the challenges I have as women is that we tend to, you know, procrastinate and talk about the obstacles and the problems that we've had and, oh, you know, the issues around inequality and the statistics around women.
We keep talking about them and we keep magnifying them.
We keep magnifying them and we keep complaining about how we've been oppressed. And of course, all that is true. But one of the statements that I made, which I'd like to reiterate for this program, is to say that let's also stop waiting for other people to do things for us. We've looked to legislation to bring affirmative action ways for us. We've looked to employment equity. As Africans, we have had SADC protocols that have been signed for 20 years. They keep moving the targets.
They do.
Oh, we're going to have women in leadership.
And UN charters.
50%, UN charters, 50% by this year, and they keep changing the goalpost. And I've come to a point where I've said, let's stop waiting for legislation or national leaders to make a way for us.
And for someone to design our agenda.
And for somebody to, exactly, to design our agenda. So if the mountain is not going to move or, you know, for us, stop waiting for somebody else to move the mountain.
You got to get up yourself.
Find a way of going around the mountain. Either you go around it, or you go over it, or you make a way through it. But let's stop apportioning blame. Oh, it's the men. Oh, it's the government. Oh, it's the legislation. But find a way. And interestingly enough, I was provoked by people in Zimbabwe to do that because I was here a couple of years ago, and I think you were at that function. For Professor Hope Sadza. And she inspired me, a woman from Zimbabwe here, when she found out that women did not have the same access to education. She didn't sit there and say, oh, you know, let's change the legislation. She actually created a university for women.
So we're seeing a woman rising up and doing something about it. And
she did something about it.
Not calling other people to have a pity party and have more discussions.
Absolutely.
And so when I'm listening to you and I'm hearing you talking about using your obstacles as a launch pad, one of the critical things that I've always admired about you is your tenacity and your resilience. And I think one of the things that affects us as women generally is our lack of understanding of our authentic identity. Most times we find our authentic identity in our marital status. Sometimes we find it in the number of children that we have, if we do have children, and how people perceive us. And when I read your book, you were talking about the balanced kingdom woman. One of the things that really impressed me is how you spoke about, indeed, using your obstacles as a launch pad. Now, I want to move on to something very recent. Just yesterday, we were watching you live on Facebook, and you were right here in Harare, Zimbabwe, delivering at the threshing floor, Generation to Generation Prayer Ministries, that conference. And you spoke about a subject that really raised a lot of questions. You were talking about the offenseless generation. Now, women easily take offense. I don't know if this is true or this is just a stereotype. But I find that in their taking offense, this actually affects them in terms of how they actually deal with their obstacles. Now I want to hear what really brought about this theme. Why did you particularly speak about that subject, and how does this affect women?
Well, I think offense can paralyze you. When you incubate and take in offense, and you sit and you just think about what people have said to you, how they've abused you, how they've oppressed you, it paralyzes you out of purpose.
Yes.
So instead of focusing on building, instead of focusing on fulfilling your redemptive purpose, you are sitting there and contemplating and meditating on offense. So offense is one of the biggest challenges that we face, not only as women, but as African people. It's a tragedy for me that we will sit and always talk about the effects of colonization. We know that we're a continent that has been colonized.
And this is decades later, and this conversation is still going on.
Most of us achieved independence from the 60s. Ghana, I think it was it 64 or
yes.
Yes. And then there was a trigger of African countries.
But we still haven't moved away from that.
But we're still talking about the effects of colonization. Most of us have celebrated a jubilee. 50 years later. So we have to move on from offense, where we realize that this happened to us.
Yes.
In America, Black Americans, yes, did they undergo slavery, etc. But let's focus on moving forward.
So it's all about what we're choosing to focus on.
Exactly.
And you're bringing this subject matter really, I think, at a very significant time, where we're having this conversation against the backdrop of our recent loss on the continent of a very iconic figure.
Yes.
You mentioned earlier, Lady Winnie Mandela. She is one woman who's an embodiment of courage, of boldness.
Yes.
She's someone who would not allow obstacles to stand in her way.
Absolutely.
As you have been reflecting yourself personally on her journey, what she has achieved, maybe what are some of the things that you want to share with the world out there, and especially to women?
Yeah, well, like you said, Mama Winnie Mandela was an icon, and I think one thing which we all have to agree with, I know that not everybody out there is a fan of hers, and she has her detractors, but definitely, whether you love her or hate her, and for me, I love her. I want to say that categorically, and I don't say it apologetically to anybody out there. She stands as a role model in many aspects, but everybody will definitely agree that she was a woman of courage.
Absolutely.
This is somebody who was abused, who was raped, who was oppressed. Many things happened to her, but she stood as a symbol of liberation. I'm not even going to get into the legal aspects of court cases against her. That's for another time or another season. But one thing I want to say is that in terms of courage, she stands out as an icon for many. And I think in this season and in this generation, we need women of courage, women who will look out there, stand up for widows, other widows, stand up for orphans, women who will go out there with a fearlessness.
It's the fearlessness really that I think most women are having a challenge with, and we want to come back in the final segment and want to talk about this because you've spoken about courage being a key ingredient.
Yes.
And I really respect the fact that we on the continent have actually taken time not only to grieve her but to celebrate her life.
Yeah.
So we're going to hold on and start from that very point in our final segment. Now, on that note, on fearlessness, Dr. Pearl Kupe, we wrap up this second segment to all of our listeners and our viewers, where we are talking about courage as a key ingredient for women who are rising in Africa. So don't go away. Join us on the third and final segment as we discuss what it is that women can actually do to mentor each other unto greatness. Don't go away. Keep watching Women Rising in Africa. Welcome back to all of our viewers and listeners. I am your host, Cynthia Chirinda Hakutangwi, and you're joining me today with Dr. Pearl Kupe on this episode of Women Rising in Africa. And we're having a very interesting conversation right here, Dr. Pearl Kupe. We've been talking about your background. We've spoken about what molded you. We've also spoken about the late Winnie Mandela, and also issues of obstacles and the courage that we need, the fearlessness. But we want to zero in a little bit more on you. You already are an icon on the African continent. Yes, trust me, you do. And I mean, we've seen so many awards that have come through your way. And I know you generally remain a very humble woman, but we salute you. We salute you on the African continent. But we want to hear a little bit more. I know one of the key vehicles you've been using of late has been the Global Forum for Women Entrepreneurs. But I know there's so many other that you've had before, the Hebrew midwives and so forth. Speak a little bit more into some of what you are personally doing to ensure that you are not only grooming the woman, but also the girl child and the women in communities.
Absolutely. Well, the Global Forum for Women Entrepreneurs is a new initiative and a network that has really recently been started. I was in London last year, and of course I've been talking about the important role that women play in the economy. Any nation that wants to do well economically, politically, socially has to take care of its women and has to involve, actively involve its women in the economic setup. And so the Global Forum for Women Entrepreneurs is an international network where we are mobilizing women. Of course, it has a Christian foundation because that is who I am. That is my identity is rooted in Christ.
But you do take in everyone,
we
of course.
are inclusive. We're inclusive. We're not exclusive. So anybody who wants to join is welcome, as long as they understand that we operate using our own kingdom principles. And so the forum is intended to do a couple of things. One, to mobilize women all over the world so that as a Zimbabwean woman who's gifted, who has skills and all of that, you now have a platform where your products or your entrepreneurial abilities can be showcased globally.
And that's what we need.
Absolutely.
We need more platforms like that.
Absolutely. Women in the United States can see the beautiful, maybe carvings. There are carvings. There's so many things that come from Zimbabwe. The Zulu beads that I'm wearing now, which are, I think, going to be so much on vogue now after the Black Panther movie.
Absolutely.
So
Wakanda.
Wakanda. Pambili. Pambili forever.
Oh, yes. Africa is definitely rising.
Yes, and congratulations to Zimbabwe for producing Danai, who was one of the stars.
Amazing gift.
Yes, the stars. And we see Zimbabwe just appearing everywhere. Donnell Mangena on The Voice UK. So well done, Zimbabwe.
Absolutely.
But it's about mobilizing, providing a business platform for women and giving that global opportunity. The other thing we do is we're teaching, equipping, training women. So there's a mentorship program there, where we have a database of all the women CEOs, women who, like you, who have done something can share their expertise and their experience. You know, if I'm a lawyer, there's a young lady out there who wants to study law, and I can help her with that.
But this is still currently in South Africa?
We have the South Africa chapter that has already been launched. We have the Botswana chapter that's about to be launched.
Wow.
We're talking about Zimbabwe now. We have a Zambia, somebody who's coordinating Zambia as well. And next week we're going to be, on the 20th and 21st, we're going to be launching the UK chapter, which is actually our headquarters base.
That's powerful. So this is definitely going beyond Africa.
Oh yes, beyond Africa.
So there's a lot of exchange for the African women in terms of them being able to also look at best practices, also looking at what the first world is doing.
Well, yes, what the first world is doing, but, you know, also letting the so-called first world, you know, I always wonder who termed who. You know, and why
that's what the development world tells us.
I know exactly. You know,
that Africa is the third world and they're so left behind.
But here's the interesting thing. Here's the interesting thing. The first world comes to the so-called third world for their resources, the platinum and the gold and etc. So if they're really first world, why are they all coming to dig out our resources?
So we've got something to give.
I'm wondering truly who is the first world.
That's a very interesting
because Africa is the one that has all the platinum, 89% of the world's total reserves, 40% of the gold, etc. So it's interesting that the first world, to me, has wanted to colonize the so-called third world.
And
we own the resources and the talent.
And I'll assume you're already throwing out these statistics that you're also empowering the women in these programs to understand the resources and the wealth that they have, being African already.
Absolutely.
Right.
We are privileged to have the King of Ghana, His Royal Majesty Drolo Boso Adamte I, who is also known as Professor Kingsley Fletcher, who's a very close friend and also, you know, pretty much a mentor to the late Dr. Miles Monroe.
So we're privileged to have. With this.
Well, he's not just partnering; he is our global chairperson. He's for the Global Advisory Board. He's our global chairperson, and he will be our speaker, keynote speaker. at the London launch. So we're privileged to have his expertise, and we're privileged to, connect to his divine connections. But it's a forum that not only brings women together on an international platform, mobilizes, equips, trains them, and also is focusing on community development and engagement. So we have projects around empowering young girls, giving the young girl child
now just
access to education.
On that note, we do have challenges in terms of just mentoring dynamics.
Yeah.
Why is it that we have, or rather, I hear a lot of the young generation, the younger generation, the women especially, they say, you know what, Cynthia, we're seeing the women out there, the older women, they're doing great, they're doing wonderful things, but how do we connect? And not only connect, but how do we also receive from them as mentors? Some of them are not accessible.
Yeah.
I don't know what maybe just speaking briefly into this as we're rounding up this segment. How can we solve this challenge?
Mentoring, I want to say, is a key aspect. For any woman out there who even wants to do better, you will do better when you're able to release some of your own gifts. The power of assistance, it's a principle whereby to the degree that you can help, you will also be helped. So I want to encourage women who have some level of success out there. Don't keep all your success to yourself. It's not what you were created for. You were created to share your experience, to share your resources, and to help others.
That's a powerful word right there to all the women who have made it. You're sitting on boards, you're sitting on governments.
That's right.
And I think Dr. Pearl Kupe has been around, very well traveled. And this is her message to you, to then say, what is it that you're doing to also pour out? But finally, as we close, words to the younger generation.
Yeah, younger generation, respect, honor your elders. Go out there fearlessly. Yesterday I was talking about young people who are rising up. The DA has the youngest MP, Member of Parliament in South Africa,
That's
a 24-year-old young woman out there.
It can be done.
Botswana has just selected its youngest minister.
The 30-year-old.
The 30-year-old.
She's amazing.
Yes, she's out there as Minister of Trade and Investment. So young people, go out there, allow yourselves to be mentored by older and wise people. Be fearless. Be leaders who will be servant leaders, transformational leaders, not leaders who are looking for Mercedes-Benz and Porsches and wanting to be served and wanting to rape the country's resources. But come up as people who are really interested in nation building. I know you're passionate about that. So as leaders who want to serve the community, are engaged with their community, want to develop your community, want to bring a level of transformation. This is my word to young people out there. Don't be looking to be known so that you do Facebook posts and just to be famous and to be
and to arrive and to be married and to have children.
Exactly. But look to
Yes.
use your talents, your gifts, your
Yes.
skills, your abilities for the transformation of the nation and to build a nation.
That's a very powerful parting shot right there. We're hearing from Dr. Pearl Kupe, an international consultant working a lot in development and also working with women empowerment. You've just heard about what she's doing in terms of just getting the women's movement together and also empowering and mentoring other women. So with this, we want to thank you, Dr. Pearl Kupe, for joining us on this episode of Women Rising in Africa. And we look forward to following you not only on social media, but throughout the continent of Africa, as you make us aware as women in Africa what it is that we can do to indeed arise in nation building. So we have come to the end of this particular episode of Women Rising in Africa, where we have been discussing issues that are affecting women from truly rising up and being able to stand out there and to be involved in meaningful and significant nation building. So we hope that you'll be able to join us on our next episode as we discuss issues that have to do with how women can arise in Africa and be counted. I am your host, Cynthia Chirinda Hakutangwi, signing out. Till next time.